had a hook to run to Congress to and complain because of who the person they were investigating was. And if you look at some of
Yeah.
the dates, the specific dates that they're talking about, there was a big chunk of time when they were complaining that, oh, the department's not letting us do this or do that, take overt steps in the investigation, when a lot of it was during an election year when they were being told that department policy is you don't take those overt
Puro
steps.
still
So
dai-
Yeah,
there's
so Andrew,
not.
I gotta jump in here because we've got most of our panelists up here, and before I start here, obviously the topic today is Donald Trump has given us notification that he will be indicted in a third case in Georgia, one that's the special counsel appointed by
This isn't the
Joe
Georgia one.
Biden.
This isn't the Georgia one. This is federal, probably in Washington.
This is the Georgia one hasn't been. I think there's no indictment or there's no indication. There's nothing about the Georgia one now. At least
I
not
think
this
there was
week.
a story on that
It's
one,
coming.
but
The Georgia one will absolutely happen.
it's definitely coming. So I'm sorry about that. But
Okay.
Trump had been he had gotten indications. This one is a federal suit about him possibly being indicted in by special counsel Jack Smith into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And so I want to go to let's see here, Mike Benz. I'd like you to sort of give an overview of that if you can, and your initial thoughts on that, and then we'll go to the panel. And I'd like everybody in the audience, also the people that have looked into this and have read about it, put your questions down in the bottom right-hand corner, and we'll send them over to our panelists here very shortly. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this is the biggest batch of bullshit the world has ever seen. This is completely delegitimizing to our system of justice, to the legitimacy of what we've entrusted to the Justice Department itself. This turns us into something worse than most third world countries. There is no doubt in my mind that this indictment will happen, and then the Georgia indictment will happen, and you will have a situation where the leading opposition on election day of next year is facing over 1,000 years in prison. You know, rape in this country is typically between 5 and 10 years, and 25.
Mike, can we? Mike, sorry, Mike, can I ask you a question if you don't mind? I'm just gonna take a few steps back. Can you just break down what the indictment? Obviously, we can only speculate, but what the indictment today would involve and how it compares to the last two indictments we've seen, the Alvin Bragg one and the Mar-a-Lago one.
Yeah, and while you answer that question, I need you to kind of break down just a little bit for the audience, summarize it for us. What is this indictment about? And then I'll also go into
So folks know Trump is currently facing something like 538 years in prison between the New York State Attorney General's office case involving an alleged payout from the 2016 election to a porn star, and then about 400 years for unspecified documents in boxes. These new charges relate to the January 6 events. So as folks know, the January 6 new 9/11, as it was sort of billed, has been this intensely media amplified insurrection plot that has sort of worked up the chain from everyone from the Proud Boys to the Oath Keepers to the 3 Percenters, and then creeping more and more into Trump's inner circle to try to build towards a case to indict Trump himself on some sort of incitement charges or some sort of conspiracy charges or some sort of racket, basically some sort of way to claw Trump into criminal culpability for the events of January 6th. So this has been a long time coming. There's been a huge amount of DOJ pressure on folks in January 6 cases to try to engineer this case, including the work of the Rigged Select Committee. And if you can indict a ham sandwich, you can damn sure indict Trump on this in Washington D.C. It has nothing to do with his with his fault. It has to do with the fact that the Justice Department is now a baseless, amoral, rogue agency, which is doing exactly what we sanction other countries for doing, locking up the leading opposition on BS charges that they know they can only get away with because they are the party in power. This is something that, really, if this stands, and there is not an eye for an eye, if Republicans don't set up prosecution factories and start going after Democrats this way, if House congressional committees don't inflict some sort of cost on doing this, then our republic is gone. Anyone who tells you eye for an eye makes the whole world blind is a defense lawyer for eye pokers.
Yeah, and so Andrew, I'm going to go back to you real quick, and then we'll get some. I'll go to Dan here right afterward. But I want to ask here. So the target letter that Donald Trump received cites 3 statutes that Trump could be charged with, including or pertaining to deprivation of rights, conspiracy to commit an offense against or defraud the United States, and tampering with a witness. What do those entail? I mean, what are their accusations here regarding the January 6th events?
Well, that's a good question, and I just want to note. I think Rolling Stone has reported what was supposedly in the target letter, and I think maybe ABC matched their reporting. I have not matched their reporting thus far, but what those charges, I want to refer back to what Mike was just saying. On the surface, do not appear to involve the violent events of that day, and there's a distinction that I think a lot of people have not been making, which is that Jack Smith's his brief, his what he's been charged with investigating is not just anything stemming out of the violence. It's also all that led up to it, the efforts to reverse the result of the 2020 election, and that has to do with the fake electors that were submitted to the National Archives, and it has to do with just efforts to somehow install himself in the White House for another 4 years against the wishes of voters as expressed through the Electoral College. And that does not necessarily have to have anything to do with the violence, but that's where you're getting the conspiracy to defraud the United States, I think. The deprivation of rights under color of law, that's an interesting, a very interesting charge. And I'm not sure where that would come from. The witness tampering, I am completely speculating because I don't know. But if I were to just throw out a wild guess, I think that might have something to do with Cassidy Hutchinson or one of the other witnesses who testified before the January 6th committee. Because if you recall, Liz Cheney teed up a recording I think it was a recording of Ms. Hutchinson's testimony when she said that she had gotten, either her or another witness had gotten pressure from people in the president's camp. And
so
I think
actually, what you said, Andrew, is really interesting. But I just want to bring Vish in. Vish.
Hey, Vish.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi. So, I mean, obviously, what we've heard from Donald Trump is there's going to be some possible indictment in relation to Jan 6. Now, the question is this. I know you can say, look, he did this wrong, and this could be the charge, and we're trying to match what the charge is possibly to what he did. But looking at it from an objective perspective, what has he actually done that would cause him to be indicted? Like, why is he getting blamed for? Let's say even the protests were really violent, which obviously we've seen the videos. There's a bit of disagreement about some of it and some of it not.
It's not clear he's getting charged for anything having to do with the protests or the violence, though. So I think there's a
no, it's not.
I'm
basing it on his response, isn't it? His press release. So, Vish, the question to you is like, what's your initial thoughts? Like, is this a political attack? Like, what is going on?
Well, I think what the sort of, what the feds here, Jack Smith, are trying to do are, and you can kind of see this in how, the media sort of frames it as, Trump didn't do anything or Trump didn't do enough when January 6th happened. I believe that is an attempt to sort of create the gross negligence standard around the actions or, the sort of events that happened on and that he didn't do enough to quote unquote quell the the outrage or the
But is that
uprising.
his job? Vish, is that his job to quell the outrage? So, I mean, I looked at his Twitter post prior to what happened. You can't, like, how could he then be charged based on that?
Well, it's not. I believe that they're attempting to that they can charge. Listen, you could charge a ham sandwich. Like that's neither here nor there. I think that there is going to be an attempt to basically hold him to that standard, and I think you're going to see, especially the media and the pundits and everybody coming out and saying, you know, it's gross negligence. He could have did more. He should have did more. He should have come up and said, you know, he should have did this. He should have did that. Right. It's basically trying to prosecute him with a game of Monday morning quarterback, right? And so that is, yeah, I think that is the strategy. And ultimately, you know, I think that even if he were to be convicted of anything that, you know, comes about, we would immediately, I believe, head into constitutional crisis, because we don't even know if, you know, a former president who's entitled to, you know, Secret Service protection for life can serve like, what does that mean? Does that mean his Secret Service agents like serve with him in jail? Like, what does that mean? So I think that ultimately this is an attempt to set the stage for the 14th Amendment and trying to basically wipe them off the ballot and say that because the president is quote unquote convicted for basically being responsible for an insurrection, he cannot run for president of the United States. I think you've already seen an attempt at this with MTG in Georgia, and I think that was a dry run, and I think that this is now the full Monty.
Yeah, so thank you, Vish. But I need to get Ben in here real quick and ask you. So, Ben, Donald Trump on January 6th tweeted out, quote, "Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful." A follow-up tweet said, "I am asking everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you." I pinned that to the top for everybody to see. That was tweeted on January 6th of 2021. So, Ben, are these charges related to January 6th actually fair, given the fact that the president of the United States, Donald Trump at the time, encouraged people multiple times to stay peaceful, never asked them to break into the Capitol, and actually was holding a rally at the time while all these other people were causing havoc at the Capitol? Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, sure. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm doing a little bit of traveling and I don't know how to sign into Wi-Fi. I'm not a technological person. So I guess my first question is this. I haven't really been able to catch up. Does anyone know what, or has there been reporting on what crimes are contained within the target letter? Does anyone know what they are?
Yes, sir. So we have 3 statutes that have been cited in that target letter that was sent to Donald Trump by the Department of Justice, pertaining to deprivation of rights, conspiracy to commit an offense against or defraud the United States, and tampering with a witness. So,
okay, so that's I think that's 18 U.S. 242 is deprivation of rights. What are the other two? So witness tampering is 1512. Okay, and what was the other one?
Okay, so what we have is, again, pertaining to deprivation of rights.
So that's U.S. That's 18. Yeah. Okay. That's 18. I'm just trying to think. That's 18 U.S. 242. Yep. Go on.
Correct. Conspiracy to commit an offense against or defraud the United States. Third, tampering with a witness.
Yeah. So okay, if that's the case, so he's not thus far being charged with the riot or however people want to frame that, right? It looks like he is potentially about to be indicted for the events surrounding, the entirety of January 6th, less the riot, right? So I remember that speech well. He said, "Let's march peacefully" and so forth. And I read the above pinned tweet, but I'm just not necessarily sure that that has anything to do with these charges, right? So deprivation of, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, what Andrew was suggesting, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but it sounds like you were suggesting that what they're really going to be aiming at is something around the elector plan. That is, there was something, so sometimes they call them fake electors. They're essentially when states send electors who do not represent the electoral college vote. This was a plot that was originally cooked up by Democrats in the 2016 election as a last-minute Hail Mary in December ahead of the January ratification in 2020.
Are you talking about the Hamilton electors thing? Because you're not exactly what they were. What you had a lot of Democrats doing in late 2016 was trying to convince electors to go rogue. These what happened in 2020, 2021 was you had fake electoral certificates submitted to the National Archives by people claiming to be the duly elected electors from these swing states. But yes, that's what I suspect the conspiracy to defraud the U.S. would be related to.
Absolutely. And conspiracy is the key word there, right? So conspiracy is not just one person. So my gut feeling, if they're going to use that statute, you're going to see a lot of potentially high profile people around him. My guess would be a lot of his lawyers, perhaps. You may see John Eastman, Lynn Wood, Rudy Giuliani. We just don't know yet. But no, so in answer to your question, Nick, I don't necessarily think that the tweet that you put up there or his speech at the Ellipse has any bearing on this whatsoever. It's just, he's not being charged thus far with the riot, or what some people call it an insurrection, but he's certainly, it looks like he's about to be charged for everything surrounding it, right? So the fake electors plot, what has Mark Meadows said, right? Clearly Mark Meadows is flipped. I mean, there's just no denying that. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
But Benjamin, do we know what this would even pertain to, though? You're talking about conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. Do we have any sort of details on what the Department of Justice has? He's talking about
conspiracy to defraud the United States, which is a specific offense.
Okay,
right.
Well,
so,
but this pertains to the 2020 election, correct?
Yes.
So it pertains to the 2020 election,
they're trying to use wordplay to basically mask what's going on here. So there's a tweet thread at the top of my profile where I go through the John Podesta plot in ahead of 2020. They planned this in June 2020. They ran the Transition Integrity Project, ran 4 simulations for disputed outcomes, and simulation 3 was called, quote, "Clear Trump Win." And this was John Podesta role-playing Joe Biden, as well as a coterie of 60-plus DNC officials and never Trump Republicans, who all got together in June 2020 to plot how to overturn a, quote, "clear Trump win" at the Electoral College level by doing the following things: getting the state electors to change their, despite states like Michigan voting for Trump, to get the electors to switch their allegiance to nonetheless go rogue and submit for Biden, to have 3 different Western states secede from the entire country: California, Washington, Oregon. The plot was for all of them to secede. This is literally in the John Podesta plan at the top of my profile there. You'll see this.
Mike, is that similar?
And then they even suggested
similar to what?
To Black Lives Matter, in order to get Black Lives Matter to act as street muscle to shut down the entire federal government.
So if I can just add one thing before I go for my cigarette. So Mike, I hear what you're saying. I am not that familiar with the Podesta simulation, but I would point out that there's a very big difference between running a simulation and, planning for whatever, I guess, permutations of something and actually trying to do it. So here, like, we can see what happened in Michigan.
We know they did. Like, first of all, conspiracy requires agreement and an affirmative step in furtherance. Okay, this is like
it's a little bit more than that, but
those are literally the 2 legal requirements for conspiracy at the federal level. And then on top of that, you have what has been stipulated from the Time Magazine article that came out right after the election, that they had agreements in place between the SEIU and the Chamber of Commerce with respect to that shutdown protest activity, which was called off at the last second because it was decided that Biden was going to win. They wouldn't need to shut down the streets. They wouldn't need to have an insurrection because Biden won. They literally had the exact same thing. And instead of getting indicted, John Podesta got promoted into the White House where he now oversees a $370 billion climate slush fund. This is the two-tier justice system we live under right now. And the whole thing has got to be effectively restructured, and this corruption has to be dismantled, or we're not going to have a country.
That's agreed.
Joe,
And if they actually put President Trump in jail, I'm sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. If they actually put President Trump in jail, I hate violence. I'm not calling for violence, but there will be violence. Think about this. If you set up President Trump and you put President Trump in jail, every one of his supporters now will feel like there's a bullseye on his back. There's a reason why I moved my family and my 6-month pregnant wife from Illinois to Florida. There was a reason for that. What's coming on the horizon doesn't look very good. It's not safe for our Constitution, not our country, and our fellow Americans, which many maybe we don't even agree with, but I still care about them for the political warfare and nonsense that we're facing. And many of them, these politicians, beholden to donors. And at the end game, that's what this is about. So yeah, you're right. We have big problems coming our way.
So, Joe, I want to bring you in here. Just give me your initial thoughts on the indictment as well. And I'm sure you have some arguments responding to our fellow panelists here. And I want to encourage the audience, bottom right-hand corner, give us your thoughts and questions. We're going to be here for a while, and we have some damn good panelists up here on both sides of the aisle. So, Joe, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I mean, just overall, I mean, there are questions, right? Yeah, you stated some of the things he said, but you didn't state all of them, right? If we don't fight like hell, we're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to the Capitol. We will stop the steal. Like, all those things that he said matter as well as respect the blue, right? He did say other things that were damning and should be investigated and be seen. Do I think it's a good look on Biden that they're going after Trump right now? No, it's not. It's going to look like the president going after Trump. That's what I think is bad. But when do you do it? When is the right time? What I don't like is this thing about, oh, there was a simulation about exactly this situation that Mike just brought up. Tom Fitton wrote an email about the fraud and about the steal of the election a week before the election even happened, right? And that's public. So to talk about there was a simulation on one side, everything was already done by Tom Fitton exactly why he wasn't going to win.
These weren't random people. These were secretaries of defense. These were John Podesta was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager.
Let me finish.
I let you finish. For the White House.
I let you finish.
This isn't like a bunch of hobos on a street corner doing a simulation. These were the people in charge of the national security state.
But it was just a simulation that was not put into place. Come on now.
Right. Historically, who wins is who raises the most money. That last debate, Trump lost. Biden raised a ton of money that last debate, and he won the presidency. That is the norm for an American election. It's whoever raised the most money wins. That is the norm, right?
What are you talking about?
It's no surprise.
Wait, first of all, what are you talking about? Trump won in 2016 despite being outspent by $300 billion by Clinton.
Yes, exactly. And I spoke about it on TED Talk Stage and said, I bet my career Trump's going to win, even though I wasn't for him. And even though he spent half as much as Hillary. That's the first time, because there was a movement. But that movement was done, Mike. That movement was done. He didn't fulfill his promises.
Democrats statistically have to pay 2 to 3 times more in donations to get
the substance of election fraud claims. Is that
Jack? Really, you're going to use one case?
Move. I don't mind going there. If
you're going to use one case in the past 30 years.
Conversation. But like you're trying to make the argument that like Biden won the election. Is that what this is?
I'm going to say that typically you look like at the past 50 years, the guy who raises the most wins. I did predict Trump would win because I work in marketing. I understand what he was doing and I understand the movement that he created. When more coal mines closed than open during his presidency, he has a serious problem, right?
Yeah,
because
a lot
his promises weren't fulfilled. When Mexico
obviously, a lot of people,
including
myself, also called the 2016 election. It had nothing to do with the amount of money raised. So why even bring that up?
Because traditionally that's what wins. No, Mike.
No, but it didn't. With this same candidate.
Traditionally.
Okay.
Traditionally, that's what wins.
You had the hold on. Across the board, if we're going to talk congressional races as well, Senate races. It's not always who has the biggest dollars. Though I'm not completely disagreeing with you, but Democrats do outraise Republicans, and Republicans still beat them on values. So that's not 100% accurate, your argument.
I'm talking about presidencies alone.
Not
Jack.
even
I'm not talking
50%
about Senate
accurate,
races.
because Trump literally won the 2016 election despite being outside by $3 million.
That's
So look, I got to run out,
of
Mario.
the
By
past
the way,
50
I
years.
gotta bounce in a minute. So just as like a closing thought here, look, for the Democrats on the panel, look, I sympathize with Democrats on a lot of things. On this, how are you going to look yourselves in the mirror at the end of this indictment process? And how do you expect, when Republicans take power, to not have something that goes the other way? How are you going to have somebody indicted for 1,000 years, all of them on basically process and paperwork type charges, 1,000 years, when a rapist or first degree murder only gets up to 25?
So why?
How do you not expect to swing this the other way? And I got to bounce, but I would like to hear the panel on that, and I'll be in the loop.
Mike, just one question before you bounce. Do you think the two 13-year-olds that accused Trump of rape at Epstein party should have been heard instead of getting death threats? Tell me that. Is that fair?
He's gone, Joe.
Well,
hold on.
You got to provide some sort of context here, man. I mean, I'm not even sure what you're talking about. Maybe you can pin it to the top, but Jack,
I'll pin it to the top.
1964 Supreme Court case. You have celebrities and elected U.S. politicians cannot be awarded libel. So this, I mean, how much of this is bullshit? How much is the real? And listen, I even sympathize with the Democrats on some of the attacks for Biden and, some of the other people. It's just ridiculous political warfare, and it's annoying, and it's continuing to divide Americans, dividing this country that I love, the country that I got involved and threw my hat in the circle to try to represent the people of Illinois. Yeah, I mean, how much of this is bullshit? I mean, we have to have a little bit of discernment here in these conversations.
So let me go to Brick. Thanks for joining us. What's your initial thoughts about this possible indictment of Trump?
Well, I think we really don't know what it's about, and the Democrats.
Who was that, Brick?
Yeah, the Democrats have made a lot of news, about how Trump was at fault for J6, that he was the architect of the insurrection. And if it turns out that this indictment is not about the mechanics of that insurrection, I see that as a retreat from the position that they had. And
I don't think you can hear Brick. I'm going to bring you down, bring you back up.
All right, thanks. So I'll continue. So if they do something where they've said for so long that the events of January 6th were all his fault, and now this indictment doesn't address that core claim, that it goes to something else that is, obviously they're still alleging it as a crime, but it's not what they were saying what he was guilty of. I think that falls a little flat, and I think that there's also a lot of for lack of a better word, indictment fatigue here. I think that casual voters and people who are following the campaign, who are not in the professional political realm, are going to have difficulty separating the indictments that may be out there from the New York, from the documents, from this one, and again, potentially one coming in Georgia. I don't know. At some point, I just don't think another indictment really is hurting President Trump at this point in time. I think the timing and the mechanism of it are incredibly suspect, and will do, if nothing else, just further energize support for him.
Can I add to Brick?
One of the things that we're missing, the key point, is January 6th wasn't a singular event just on the 6th. It didn't just happen. It was planned out. It had the event, and then there was consequences from after the event as well. And I think
Okay, but what do you mean planned out, Dan? You're talking about planned out by who? Who was this planned out by? You're not referring to Donald Trump, correct?
Well, I mean, it was planned out by multiple members of Congress, by conservative talk personalities who were telling people to go and to fight. I mean, there were a lot of people involved in this. It's not just a singular.
So are you saying that there was a conspiracy to the accusation is raid the Capitol,
100.
I guess? Or you're saying that there were multiple members of Congress that were encouraging people to raid the Capitol. Is that what you're saying?
There were members of Congress giving tours to the Proud Boys 1 week prior to the incident. I mean,
can I just jump in for?
a sec? Andrew, I'll let you follow up right to me, but I just want to say, Dan, it's very easy. You call your congressman's office, and anybody can get a tour. They don't discriminate based on that. So, just to be clear,
he's trying to imply that they were given tours simply for the purpose of insurrection, to know the ins and outs of the Capitol. And
that seems like quite a far-fetched accusation, Sarah, just based on the fact that I could call and get a tour, in 3 days. So go ahead,
Nick,
Andrew. Go ahead.
Nick, well, just to address that real quick, there weren't any authorized tours going on at the time because of COVID, but I think I forget who was just talking about the idea that someone asked about a conspiracy to Dan talked about a conspiracy to raid the Capitol or something. Well, in fact, the Justice Department just got a couple of jury verdicts in cases where they proved that there was such a conspiracy, and this was the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers.
People, Andrew, though?
No, I didn't say among Congress people. Dan was asking if there was a conspiracy to storm the Capitol, and there were two big court cases about just that.
That is what Dan said, that there was a conspiracy among Congress people. So,
well, even if there had been among Congress people, you'd run into speech and debate clause problems in trying to bring charges against them. But there were seditious conspiracy indictments brought that resulted in convictions, and that's not an easy thing. And we usually, when the feds bring seditious conspiracy indictments, they lose. So this was an outlier in that they were able to bring these indictments against Proud Boys and Oath Keepers leaders and get a jury to agree. But it does not look thus far as if Donald Trump will be charged with seditious conspiracy. That I know that's something a lot of liberal talking heads have been throwing about, and it wasn't, I believe, one of the things that the January 6th committee included in their referral to the Justice Department, but the witness tampering and the conspiracy to defraud the United States were included in those referrals. But it's just worth pointing out that the DOJ has gotten jury verdicts on seditious conspiracy over January 6th, but it does not look like that's what they're going after Donald Trump for. Now, as for what Mr. Bricksuit was saying about indictment fatigue, and it's going to be a letdown to people if Trump isn't charged for anything directly linked to the violence. I kind of get what you're saying there, but I'm not sure that that's actually going to be the case, because the documents indictment is, in some ways it's simple, but because it involves national defense information, it's complex in its own way, and it's hard to understand for people who just casually watch the news. Witness tampering, that's easy to understand. Everyone's seen The Godfather. Everyone's seen mob movies. People.
But how was Donald Trump tampering with witnesses, though, Andrew?
I don't know. If it's charged, we're going to see it in the indictment.
I suspected it was a text message to somebody or something like that. Some form of message that will be argued to be tampering. But are you going to find a smoking gun where President Trump is saying do this or that? You're not going to find that. That's not there.
We don't know.
I'm not going to say we're not going to find that, because I don't know. It hasn't been revealed. I highly suspect that won't be the case. That it will be something where a statement was made and they will try to build, the case that was tampering, and people will have to evaluate that on whether or not, what the true intentions were. So, I don't think we're going to see something as clear cut as The Godfather. I just don't. My feeling is that won't happen.
No, but my point is that that's actually a pretty easy thing. It's an easy concept for people to grasp. And so I think that if that's one of the charges, I think it might have more of an effect than Mr. Suit is suggesting, because it's just conceptually easier for some people to get why that's bad, and why the former president might be charged for something like that.
I'll agree. I will agree with that if the language is clear. It's my feeling is just that the language won't be clear that that's what was occurring. So that's, I totally stipulate that if it was something that would outright language like that, that would be easier for lay people to understand. I just don't get the feeling, based upon a lot of, not much my feeling, but actually so many other things that the president has said being interpreted, I don't want to say twisted, but being interpreted with what I perceive as a bias to try and prove a point, which is, of course, the whole, part of the main goal of the legal system is to do that. So, I just think that it's not going to be something clear cut that people will be able to latch on and said, oh, yeah, that really was that. I think there's going to be an argument that needs to be made, because I think if they had that smoking gun, they already would have fired it.
Ben?
Yeah, so just to what Brick Suit said, I hear what you're saying, right? But in terms of a smoking gun, right, so we know that he got a target letter, right? We have a decent idea of what the charges will be, but I think that what people potentially are discounting is, and I'm going to say this again, where is Mark Meadows, right? So he may be that smoking gun. You may have a John Dean moment with Mark Meadows. That's going to be very interesting, right? He's been very quiet, clearly. Well, in my mind, he's obviously cut some type of a deal. So we have to wait and see, because that might not be a smoking gun. That might be a smoking cannon, right? I mean, Mark Meadows was the man. He knows where the proverbial bodies are buried. So we'll see. Now, it's also of note, I'd like to know what happens with Rudy Giuliani. That's going to be very interesting to watch, right? So again,
Ben, just two questions. What do you mean by that? And second question, if he is indicted, like what kind of timeline are we looking at?
Yeah, so what I mean about Rudy Giuliani is this, right? I'd like to know if he's going to enter into some type of cooperation deal. That's going to, I do believe he will be indicted, perhaps in the next week. I'm talking about Giuliani. But again, simply because somebody is indicted doesn't preclude them from entering into some type of cooperation agreement. I mean, Rudy Giuliani is a former U.S. attorney. He knows what he's up against. Timeline is going to be hard to say, right? So it'll be a little bit different in my mind.
Sorry, Ben, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, sure.
I do want you to answer the timeline thing. But so, are you saying that you think Giuliani will turn on Trump?
So I think that once Rudy Giuliani is confronted, if he is indicted with, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Rudy Giuliani is an old man, and if the evidence is strong, he's well aware of what it takes to prove a crime and get a conviction, especially in DC. He very well may, right? He doesn't want to spend years and years in prison, because with Rudy Giuliani, you're not dealing with a former president where you have to have, very special security concerns. And if Trump is convicted, do we construct a new facility to accommodate a secret security or secret service? Rudy Giuliani is just a regular private individual. So he absolutely can and potentially will go to prison. Those are his options, right? So when you're faced with that, a lot of people flip. Secondly, the timeline, I can't answer that really confidently. I don't know. It will be different than what we're dealing with in Florida. Clearly, Judge Cannon has no interest in setting a trial date in December, which was, I believe, that's what the DOJ requested. And they probably have a legitimate claim there, DOJ, right? I mean, there's 800,000 documents. There's thousands of hours of security footage. DC is going to be a little different, right? You're going to have a very different judge, a very different jury. That trial may come first. So let's say this: I don't believe that the Mar-a-Lago trial will get underway before the 2024 election. I do think that there is a reasonably good chance that if he's indicted next week, that will get at some point underway, maybe within the next year.
So then you said you think Giuliani will get indicted this week. What about Trump?
Oh yeah, of course he's going to be indicted. 100%. He'll be indicted within a week. Absolutely.
Oh, you think it's going to happen within this week?
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't give
It'll
out
be
target
before
letters for fun.
next. Yeah, it'll be before next
what, sorry?
Thursday. It'll be
Wow.
before next Thursday. So this is
Why do you
normally
think
the way it
that?
works. Yeah, so you do not send a target letter unless you clearly intend to indict a person. So this will be the big sign. If you see what's called a pitch meeting, that'll happen. Andrew, you know how these things work too. I think we'll probably see a pitch meeting at some point early next week. It may take a couple weeks to actually get the indictment voted on, but you'll see a pitch meeting. A pitch meeting is a courtesy in which the Trump's attorneys will sit down with prosecutors and try to present their case for not indicting their client. We saw that with Manhattan. We saw that with Mar-a-Lago. So, once you see that meeting take place, once you see it's getting reported, look for an indictment immediately after.
All right, so I want to go real quick to two people here. I want to go to Christian Ziegler. Sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong here, as well as Chris Nelson. Christian, you're the chairman of the Florida Republican Party. You say you're a fan of both Trump and DeSantis. Chris, you're a pretty well-known DeSantis surrogate. I want to know from you guys, and then I'm going to go to Preston to let Preston follow up here. Is this, we keep seeing indictment after indictment for Trump. It rallies his base, right? The donations pour in by the millions. Is this a problem for the DeSantis campaign? Can they even overcome this stuff? Christian, I'll let you start first. Let Chris follow up, and then Preston. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll get into the fallout in a second. But, what's interesting is in 2016, I was actually a member of the Electoral College as well here in Florida. And Trump obviously won, 2016 around the country, but also Florida. But I will tell you guys, I got, as a member of the Electoral College, not just me, but every single member here in Florida and across the country, we got tens of thousands of letters, calls, emails. People were threatening us, like personally threatening us, trying to get us to flip our Electoral College vote from Trump to Hillary, which was pretty interesting. And after December and after that occurred, no one's ever talked about that. That's pretty clear intimidation and trying to, influence the outcome of the election. But so that was something. I just put a tweet on my Twitter account I just found from back then that kind of went viral that showed some of the letters. But I probably got tens of thousands of letters in my mail really pushing that. But, when we're looking at this, I think the first individual that was speaking, talking about how this is a dangerous precedent, I agree with that. I hate to see it, but it is something that hopefully Republicans, when they get in, I think they're going to probably look to use the system against the Democrats. And it's really dangerous what the Democrat Party's doing. Here they are screaming about protecting quote unquote democracy. And it looks like they're willing to burn it down in order to go after Trump. But, what's going on here that I think politically is it's not really to hurt Trump or even make him the nominee, which some people talk about. I actually think what they're doing is they're trying to motivate their left base, and they're trying to do everything they can to get Democrats behind Biden. They got a corpse here that is barely alive in the White House, is not exciting anyone. And that's why they're going all in on some of the trans and some of the other issues, the anti-parent issues, is to mobilize their base. And this is probably an easier path for them to do that. But what I'll share is I think across the board with Republicans, I don't care if you're a Trump supporter, DeSantis supporter, Nikki Haley, Vivek, whoever, is it's a reminder, and they need to be very careful how aggressive they go here, is it's a reminder of these institutions have been taken over and now they're being weaponized against a certain political faction in the country. And I think that's going to be the theme of the campaign as we go through this is, what candidate can best dismantle some of these institutions that are being weaponized against the American people. And, if the left really pushes this hard, what's going to happen is, independents and even soft Democrats are going to say, whoa, this is just like way too much. There aren't a lot of people that support big government, even on the left. But this is a pretty clear, showcase of that. So right now, they just need to be careful how aggressive they go. And it's become almost a joke on the Republican side now. And it's a joke, but it's also making us very angry. And I think Republicans, and you've seen comments from DeSantis and other, Trump opponents that are coming to his defense on this, because we are getting sick and tired of these institutions being weaponized. But again, they need to be very, very careful about overdoing it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go, Chris. I'm gonna go back to my original question here, and then Preston. Obviously, you're a pretty big DeSantis surrogate here, and I have to know from you: does this affect this third indictment, all these other indictments? Does it worry the DeSantis camp? You know, because it's bringing millions of dollars to Donald Trump's campaign. Every time he gets indicted, he ends up going in the up in the polls for the GOP nomination for president in 2024. Is this a problem for the DeSantis campaign? What are your thoughts, and how are they responding to it?
Well, Nick, thank you very much for having me on. Chris Nelson here. And first, I just want to say that for some reason I've been shadow banned, or people are having trouble seeing some of my tweets. And I'm really hoping that Twitter support and Elon Musk will do something about this. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I think that was a very good point that Christian brought up, that that this is probably a lot more about riling up the base. And this is absolutely targeting by the Justice Department. And please, you're telling me they couldn't have done this earlier? They're waiting until the election to do this? This is without a doubt election interference. And I can't speak for Ron DeSantis. You call me a surrogate, but I certainly do not work for the DeSantis campaign. I'm a person who reported on Ron DeSantis for years and started out as a pretty fierce critic of him. And he won me over through basically promoting things like standing up against big government and things like the Justice Department and people in Washington like Fauci and what they're doing. So I would tell you, I believe that Ron DeSantis wants a clean race against Donald Trump, minus this election interference. The idea that Ron DeSantis would want the Justice Department filing all these indictments against Trump is ridiculous. Number one, because he said this before, that it's wrong to be, for one party to be targeting the other party. And
but
where
Chris,
are the Democrats?
this is not what I'm asking here. What I'm asking is, does this have any sort of effect on the GOP primary for president of the United States in 2024? Because again, I'll say it for a third time here: Trump raises millions and millions of dollars every time one of these indictments comes out, and he goes up in the polls. Is that a problem for the DeSantis camp?
Well, it certainly does help him when he gets indicted. Do I think that the DeSantis camp is sitting there and going, "Oh, darn it, we're going to lose because he gets indicted"? No, I think that that it very well may help Trump, but at the same time, I think Ron DeSantis is about doing the right thing, as he's always been. And then when I hear, first of all, there's people that were going after the January 6ers, okay, and trying to identify them and turn them over to the FBI, and all the people on the left doing that. That was really shameful. You know, I mean, calling it an insurrection and the way that everybody turned against each other over this was just disgraceful. And we need a president that's going to effectively rein in this Justice Department. When I hear Donald Trump talk about wanting to build the FBI a new building, these are the people that are trying to throw him in jail. When I hear him saying that, "Oh, I talked to this Democrat and he told me I should back the vaccine," these are the people that want to throw you in jail.
Chris, I'm going to keep on topic here. Preston, I'm going to let you follow up to that. Then I'm bringing in Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who's up on stage. Welcome back, Dr. Gorka. Preston, respond to that. Let me know, is this a problem for the DeSantis campaign? And, you know, is there really any hope for the DeSantis campaign at this point? Preston, go ahead.
Listen, I don't think there is. This last weekend at Turning Point Actions event, we saw that Vivek Ramaswamy won the poll of who would you pick if you couldn't have Trump, who would it be? And Vivek won over DeSantis, and Trump just totally obliterated everybody in the overall poll. But when it comes to these indictments, I think you've got nothing more than, obviously we've said it's a total political witch hunt. But in any other time period, people engaging in this level of conspiracy, they're throwing these words conspiracy and sedition and treasonous around. The only ones with that sort of level of contempt are the ones at the helm of this persecution. In any other time period, these people would have been sent to the gallows. But in America, we send them to the highest office of the land. I don't know why. But it comes down to the fact that they know the bold and the formidable threat that Trump